Good day, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this International CML Foundation effort to educate physicians around the world, in this case about treatment remission. My presentation, I'm Gianantonio Rosti, and I'm involved in CML since many years, and currently working in this scientific institute for research in Italy. And for me, it's really important since I am old enough to remember when speaking of interrupting any TKI was simply a dream or something really foolish, even to be thought. So how to communicate with patients about TFR is something challenging for me, and I'll present data taken from the literature, and I express even some my personal behavior about this particular topic. In the next slide, there are my disclosures, and I'm going to start from a snapshot taken from a blog in Facebook of patients in treatment remission, and taken a few days ago, and it's quite, if you want, funny to see patients writing that in this case the new ONC is actually an anti-TFR. So there are today physicians around the world in favor, against, or neutral for TFR. Is seen still as something disconnected from the entire enterprise of CML treatment. I try to explain a little bit better. Until now, we discussed TFR as an endpoint, sometime disconnected from others. So which is the best endpoint for you? Is overall survival, quality of life, treatment remission, deep response? No, TFR is completely part of the story. So it is the duty of any physician to have in mind this from the very beginning, informing the patients once more from the very beginning of the journey. I'm sorry, I went back. I took some data from the literature just to demonstrate that until now we had a problem with communication, and all the trials published about communication or willingness of patients to discontinue the treatment were based on questionnaires, on interviews, and rarely was guided from the physicians taking care of the patient from the very beginning. In this slide, you see a survey, a large one, more than 1,000 respondents in China, and these patients were informed through advocacy meetings, education conferences, and so there was not the hand of the doctor from the very beginning of the story. These patients were very young, medially 41 years, half of them less than 40 years when responding to the questionnaires, and they had a median treatment duration short, 3 years, so not selected for being respondent to TKIs or not. And these patients said, is TFR a therapy goal? 50% of them said yes, or 45% said a normal life plan is very important. But when they were asked about treatment remission, if possible, of course, so in due condition, safe condition, with a good lab, 83% said yes, and 17% said no. So the majority of the patients in favor of, but you see what was the reason in China. So the world is very large. The reason in China for discontinuing the drug was mainly due to the financial burden. In other words, in China, nowadays, the financial burden for TKIs is around $4,000 a year, which is a huge sum for many Chinese persons. So you see, in this case, was not the desire of treatment discontinuation, but financial burden. And the minority said no for the reason we are expecting the fears of disease relapse and or TKI resistance. This was China, and you saw how these data have been retrieved. If we move to Italy, in this case, more than 1,000 patients, the Massimo Brescia published in Leukemia Research in 2015, so they are already old data. They were older than Chinese one, of course. Europe is an old continent, 57 years, and the majority of these patients that have a long duration of the disease, more than 10 years. But once more, the results of this survey was based on patients responding to questionnaires given by the doctors and distributed. So lacking of education from the very beginning. In Italy, in this case, we have surprisingly 50% of all the patients who would not interrupt the treatment because they said, I am afraid of reshining the results I have achieved so far. 50% in Italy, 2015. And of course, this old experience are saying us the heart of the problem, which lesson learned from the past. A lack of proper communication from the very beginning, and we see education or information about treatment for remission should be transformed in what I call a continuous education. So every patient from the very beginning are educated about TFR, but then they received updating about the process of response, of toxicities, and looking forward about TFR. If we analyze even highly selected group of patients, like in this Australian study, selected for being at least in MR4, more than 800, but only 86 participated, unfortunately, highly selected. Most of them said, more than 80%, they said willing to stop the treatment. So if we move to a more motivated or more educated, more informed patient population, but highly selected, responses are very different. So we saw China results similar to a US study for different reasons, but not so different. The Italian survey, 50% in 2015, still answering not, and the majority of a selected patient population. So there is still in the past some, if you want, confusion how to understand these differences. The art of the problem is once more what is the subtle perception of the patient. This cartoon is probably not easy to be seen. The only significant differences between patients not willing or willing to discontinue were the deep fears this perceived susceptibility to relapse, the perceived severity of relapse. You see that nowadays these barriers can be destroyed easily. So you know well that performing or starting a TFR in the good condition with a good lab, there is no fear for the future of a patient. So this type of fears should be erased in the future. They are the only significant differences between the two casuistics, even if small, I agree, but just to support what I'm discussing. And this slide cannot be read, and I put this slide just to let you aware that the reason why the patients are expressing willingness or reluctance to TFR are so different. They cannot be, what can I say, put in 2 or 3 boxes. The message is, speak to each of your single patients, to each, because anyone has probably a particular fear, a particular perceptions, and only is discussing with your patients. So I believe that the end of my presentation is easy now. My personal view is that we should inform all the patients about this possibility. Until a couple of years ago, probably many physicians discussed about TFR only with young patients, less than 40 years in Europe. They are very infrequent, or infrequent, because for good reasons. A young patient is more motivated to stop because TKI may affect the quality of life, and for a number of reasons that a young person do not want, if possible, to be on treatment for life. Frequently, particularly in Western countries, younger patients are already informed before the first visit with a hematologist that TFR is a possibility. But at the same time, even older patients, and probably less motivated baseline, you know that refusal to discontinue in many casuistics are particularly relevant in the older patient population strata, but they should be informed as well. Because if your choice is second generation TKI, is that you know that nilotinib particularly has a very structured body of evidence that nilotinib is able to induce more deep responses, and we have created a model with nilotinib in the NS Freedom study and other similar one. But you know that in older patients, probably nilotinib or second generation TKIs are not the best choice sometimes because of the toxicity. And imatinib is still prescribed in older patients and in many others. But with imatinib, the chance of a TFR is not nil, is simply inferior to nilotinib. But an older patient, let's say 65 years of age, taking imatinib after 10 years with imatinib is in deep response and may be motivated or even forced for other comorbidities to stop the treatment. So this opportunity is, in my mind, to be posted to any patient, just excluding the oldest old, if you want. When is important? When? During the first months, okay, I do not suggest to inform about TFR at the first site, at the first visit, because at the first visit, for many patients, the issue of chronic leukemia is still so relevant that discussing at the same time of a chronic leukemia, once upon a time deadly and now treatable, with the possibility of discontinue can probably lead to some fears or some confusion in the patient mind. So wait a couple of weeks or 1 month, let your patient to digest the diagnosis and the treatment plan, and then open the window for a potential treatment for remission. It is important to avoid absolutely too negative framing effects, or even too positive framing effects, to be neutral. And TFR is not an endpoint. TFR is part of the story, is an opportunity, is a possibility. And this is fresh air for all the patients. So they are informed that this disease is not so terrible that they are forced to take pills for life. But at a given point, it is possible that the treatment can be discontinued. This is very important for any patients. Just a couple of examples I'm coming to conclude about positive or negative framing. The first sentence is a negative one. TFR is good, is an endpoint, but the chance of being free of treatment in the long term is 40–50%. So not really attractive enough, they say. This is negative, too much negative, or even too much positive. TFR is so important, and the chance is 50% is really attractive. We'll discuss TFR time by time. In this case, the positive framing can induce in the patient the perception that if she or he will fail a TFR possibility, is failing more at large the treatment plan. So be neutral, and we have data as TFR is a safe and rooted opportunity. Of course, the most important endpoint is a normal quality and quantity of life, but we'll evaluate this during treatment. So be neutral, not be a fan or against is not a football match, but be neutral and sweet as ever. And it's probably useful to use even some leaflet like this representative curve to describe to the patients when possible, when the patient is a candidate, what's happening, and that there are no risk because monitoring is appropriate, and thousands of patients already attempting discontinuation. So was to be discussed, was to be offered to all the patients. And from my side is everything for this webinar. I am really grateful to all of you for watching, and of course I am available off webinar for any questions you have in mind to post to myself.